We're going to talk about Joseph's tears. If you are new and you don't know what's happening, I'm that kind of pastor that we prepare one sermon and we preach it the whole year. So our sermon for the year is Bible stories for grown-ups. But the agenda is simple. I want you to understand the stories of the Bible, but as grown-up versions of the story, because I do believe we grow up as adults, but our theology stays. We call it that Velcro theology. You know, I've been sharing this a couple of times. You know the Velcro theology when they tell you the Bible story and they put up the Velcro pictures of the Bible story to us. But now the problem is, as adults, we face real-world problems with childhood theology, and that's where things get difficult. And many times people walk away from the faith because they feel God is not real. But the problem is they're trying to remember the Sunday school stories and applying that to the adult problems that we are facing. And I don't want to re-preach this whole series again, but that's the idea that I want to share with you. Let's jump into Genesis 42 verse 18 with glasses on. Okay, it looked like the 16, but it's verse 18. On the third day, Joseph said to them, "Do this and you will live, for I fear God." Verse 19. "If you are honest men, let one of your brothers remain confined where you are in custody, and let the rest go and carry grain for the famine of your household." Verse 20. "And bring your youngest brother to me, so your words will be verified, and you shall not die." And they did so. Verse 21. Then they said to one another, "In truth, we are guilty concerning our brother, in that we saw the distress of his soul when he begged us, and we did not listen. This is why this distress come upon us." I just want to pause there. It's a reference to the brothers of Joseph selling him when he was younger, telling his father he died, selling him into slavery. And so it's a remembrance of that entire story. Verse 22. "And Reuben answered them, did I not tell you not to sin against the boy? But you did not listen. So now there comes a reckoning for his blood." Verse 23. "They did not know what Joseph understood. They did not know that Joseph understood them, for there was an interpreter between them." 24. "Then he turned away from them and wept. And he returned to them and spoke to them. And we took Simeon from them and bound him before their eyes." Now, I need to be honest, I'm not going to spend too much time on this. It will be a little bit difficult to understand if you do not have an idea on the story, but I don't have time to run through the whole story of Joseph, but to try to do a summary quickly. You have Joseph, this young brother, amongst all his brothers. He's the youngest, and he sees these dreams he had, and he sees in his dream his brothers bowing down to him, and they get very agitated. He gets a beautiful coat, and they get frustrated that he's isolated and feels special, and they sell him into slavery. He goes to Potiphar's house, and the whole process happens. He gets falsely accused. He ends up in jail, and the long story of this, he gets appointed by Pharaoh to run this whole famine that's taking place. That is severely underestimating the depth of the story, but it's just to give you an idea. Where we are reading from now is Joseph being positioned in a position of power, and for the first time he encounters his brothers that sold him into slavery many, many years ago. And that's the perspective of what we are talking about. But just to give you a little bit of a recap where we're coming from, the last time I had the privilege of preaching, we were talking about Joseph's dreams, if you guys can recall that. And the context we were speaking about was this, is that when human ability separates from humility before God, we do not just progress, we drift. And the whole conversation about these dreams is that as we look at society, as we look at Joseph, we have these dreams, we have these visions, we have this beautiful idea moving forward. But the challenge that we faced in our life is that sometimes we get a little bit arrogant with the dreams that we get. We sometimes get a little bit arrogant with the vision that we get. And what happens is what is meant for good sometimes turn out a little bit bad because of a bad sense of character in our lives. Not referring to Joseph to this specifically, but I'm drawing from that when we look at society. With technology growing, it is phenomenal what we are able to achieve. But if we are not careful, this growth that takes place will become arrogance, and it will reflect more like Babel than progress. And so we said this idea that technology is a gift, but greed really becomes a danger. The next one for me. And I was referring to Joseph's dream, where young Joseph sees people bowing to him. Young Joseph's dream looks like status, and young Joseph sees elevation. But the moment we talk about mature Joseph, you see his dream was meant to preserve others. It was about his calling and stewardship in his final position, and mature Joseph suddenly carries responsibility. Now, if you feel a little bit lost, it's because that was a 40-minute sermon comparing these two, younger Joseph with older Joseph, but I'm just recapping those who can remember. The last thing is this that I want to share with you is that if your dream only serves you, it's not mature yet. That's the big takeaway that we got. Now, I'm going to talk to you about Joseph that is established. Joseph at the end of the story, after these dreams, after all the things go wrong, now he's established and he encounters those people who hurt him. And we're going to start this conversation talking about space. I need you to give me the benefit of the doubt. It's going to feel confusing for a second, but at the end, we're going to smash it all together and it's just going to make perfect sense. So when I started preparing this, I had one question at the center of my heart. And that is, how big is space? And I went to the most well-known source of where we get space information, and that's NASA. The problem is NASA wasn't very helpful in the opening passages. How big is space? Well, they said space is really big. Okay, so no, serious. You can check that. I'm giving you the reference. I'm not kidding. I mean, I expected a little bit more, okay, with regards to this conversation. And so they put it in this way, okay. You can go to the next one. Space is really big. And then they said, thinking about our solar system, let's imagine you could get into a car and drive to Pluto at highway speeds. It would take you about 6,000 years to get there. Can you go one back for me, please? And I immediately giggled. For some reason, I heard my dad's voice speaking to me and saying, I can do that in 5,000 years. Okay. If you know my dad, you know that's exactly something that he would have said. Okay, in any case, so it's quite vast, okay? You can go to the next one for me. Light travels at about 186,000 miles per second. That's about 300,000 kilometers per second. 1 light year is about 6 trillion miles, is about 9.7 trillion kilometers. And the closest star to our sun is about 4 light years away. That's 38 trillion kilometers. So I want to share this with you. I read that, but I don't understand that, just to be honest, okay? Because the numbers, it's so vast, we can't understand it. It's impossible for our human brain to understand the vastness of space. And here comes the most scariest part of it all. Many of the references to space is what is referred to as the observable universe, okay? These large numbers, which our mind does not understand, only refers to what can be currently measured by scientists. They can't see beyond what they can't see, which means it begs the question, is there more space? Is there more galaxies? And we're talking about ridiculous numbers. Just our own Milky Way galaxy, the one galaxy in a world of 2 trillion galaxies. It's crazy numbers. Don't quote me on that. My brain doesn't work when we talk about these things. Just our galaxy is about 946 quadrillion kilometers. And I know some people are, that's my tax return last year month. Okay. Yeah. And here's the significant part of this conversation. Is that as far as we know, as far as we currently know, in this vast universe, Earth remains the only place we have confirmed life. The only place. Now, don't worry, I'm not going to talk about aliens and ancient civilizations and things like that, okay? So I don't want you to get scared now. But I want you to be aware of that significance. Because statistically, there should be more life in the universe, statistically, okay? Because if that doesn't make sense, I mean, you are 1 in a million, okay? Well, if we are 6 billion people in the world, there are a lot of ones in millions. Okay, I'm just mentioning for what that's worth. And when you look at the context of space, from a mathematical and probability perspective, Earth should not be unique because of the vastness. And this is why governments spend quite a lot of resources in looking for life. They haven't found any life out there yet because, I can't say why they can't find any life, but they've been looking for signs. There's a lot of conspiracy theories, but the bottom line is this. We have this blue planet in this vastness of the universe, and we get to live on this. So that thought, that idea, that thought does something to us. Well, let me rephrase that. It does something to me when we consider the small little planet and this vastness. And it makes human life feel incredibly small, but yet incredibly significant at the same time. And this brought me to another thought. See, if we are significant, what makes this significance meaningful? And so this is where we're going to talk about Joseph's tears. I need you just to bear with me for a second. I know this feels crazy talking about the universe and space, and now I'm talking about a guy crying, okay? But we're going to get this together. Genesis 42, verse 24. Now, I just want to pause there. I'm going to show you a couple of places now where we find that Joseph weeps a lot. He cries, and the Bible is very intentional about highlighting these occasions where he cries because of the significance and the hurtful experience that he went through as a young boy and as a young adult as well. So I want you, I think there's about 7 verses which I just quickly want to read to you. So I want you to pick up on the consistency. Then he turned away, this is a reference to Joseph, from them and wept. And he returned to them and spoke to them, and he took Simeon from them and bound him before his eyes. Go to the next verse for me, please. Then Joseph hurried out, for his compassion grew warm for his brothers, and he sought a place to weep, and he entered his chamber and wept there. The next one for me. Then Joseph could not control himself before all those who stood by him, and he cried, "Make everyone go out from me." So no one stayed with him when Joseph made himself known to his brothers. Next one for me, please. And he wept aloud, so that the Egyptians heard it, and the household of Pharaoh heard it. I just want to pause there. For a man to have power and authority and be the right hand of Pharaoh to make sure that the entire civilization does not die off of hunger, the entire community, so many people that he's responsible for, to put himself in a position where he cannot control his emotions, where he cries so loud that the boss that relies on his strength hears him. That's a very humbling moment. That's a very sensitive moment. Next verse. Then he fell upon his brother's Benjamin's neck and wept, and Benjamin wept upon his neck. Next one for me again, please. And he kissed all his brothers and wept upon them. After that, his brothers talked with him. Next one for me, please. This is the next. Oh, is there 2 more? Then Joseph prepared his chariot and went up to meet Israel, his father, in Goshen. And he presented himself to him and fell on his neck and wept on his neck for a good while. And here's the last. Okay, not the last one. Okay, he's crying a lot. Then Joseph fell on his father's face and he wept all over him and kissed him. This is a little bit reference a bit later, because when he got reconciled to his dad, but after a while his father passed away, and it just brought up all the emotions again. And now his father passes away, his brothers is scared again, and it just refers again to this part where they're asking for forgiveness, and he becomes emotional again. You see, Joseph's tears is significant because it's the man who had everything, but he still wept. Every single occasion where the Bible records his tears, I want you to understand that it links back to his experience. It links back to the conversation about how his family treated him. It links back to the conversation about how he missed his dad. It speaks back to the occasions of years that's lost. It speaks about this conversation about the people that was meant to protect him, the people that is meant to love him, the people that's meant to be there for him were the people that caused the most hurt in his life. And he puts himself in a position where every time someone talks about this or when he's confronted with this, he's got no control over his emotions. But here is where the story gets dangerous. Because now he's no longer the boy in the pit anymore. Suddenly when he, as we've been reading the opening passages of my sermon, he finds himself in a position of power where he has control. He now has the ability to punish those who hurt him. But you know what's interesting about his tears? You know what's interesting about his emotions and what he experienced is this, that power could not solve all his problems. And many times, and I want you to pick up on this, many times our problems are the root cause of why we pursue things. Many people in successful positions, they tend to have a background story and say, I will not allow this to happen to me. I'm going to pursue this. And this is just an interesting conversation. I want you to look at well-known, and this is not true for everyone, but there's enough stories for me to pick up a trend. People who are very gesteld. Don't ask me what that is in English. They are very prone to make sure that they are extremely well built, especially under the gentlemen, okay? They really focus on having massive muscles, and I'm not insulting anyone that does bodybuilding and exercising. This is not a reflection on them, but I want to explain to you, many of these celebrity, big-built individuals, they've got a story of abuse and hurt and bullying when they were younger, and in many occasions, they just decided that they want to ever feel weak again in their life. And so they physically built up their bodies so that they don't have to be scared of anything and don't have to be scared of anyone. Again, not a reference to everyone that goes to the gym, okay? This is not an insult. This is just a conversation on how we use our experiences as fuel to get us into a place of power. People do this in the business world as well, okay? But here's the thing about this, and I want you to be very clear. I want you to understand this clearly, that success does not erase pain. And I'm not saying it's bad to run after success, but we've got this false idea that if we can just get this in place, the problems will go away. And that is not the truth, ladies and gentlemen, because new problems will arise in every season of our life. And so we sometimes run after something so that we can have power with this hope that it will take things away in our life. Can I share point number 2 that builds off of that? Power does not produce healing. It does not produce healing. You can't do something on the outside to heal something that's wrong on the inside. And so they faced with a lot of difficult elements. But now we have Joseph in this position where now he has power, now he's got influence, and he's got control over the people who hurt him. And he reveals something that is mind-blowing. He reveals something in the story that takes us to a place that's so much deeper than what we tend to give as a reason why we pursue these things. So, what is the key here then in the story? Can I ask you another question? What has this got to do with the universe as well? I spoke about space, I'm talking about Joseph, I'm talking about all these deep things. What is the point of this whole conversation? Well, I'm going to quote 1 Corinthians, and I'm going to allow the Bible to tell us the idea behind this. And if I speak in tongues of men and of angels, but I have not love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. Verse 2. And if I have prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all faith so as to remove mountains, but have not love, I'm nothing. Just pause there on verse 2. And if I have all the faith in the world, you can trust God with everything in your life. You can pray consistently. You can know your scripture verses out of your head. You can be extremely intellectually gifted. But if you don't have love, you have absolutely nothing. Verse 3. And if I give away all I have, you can even be generous. But if the heart is not love, there is zero gain. Listen carefully to me. You have achieved nothing. My biggest, my wife's listening to this now, I can't pull back now. My biggest defense when my wife and I argue, no, we don't argue, we are pastors, we don't argue. We don't argue. We just agree every time with one another. Yeah, I know, we are fantastic. You know, sometimes I'm just thinking, how are we so perfect in life? Yes, like it. Eric, I don't want to hear that. I'm just teasing. I'm coming to it. My biggest defense in my life against my wife, okay, now, well, it's not going to work after this anymore because I'm revealing it to you, is this. Then I tell her, you know what? You are sometimes just so right that you are so wrong. Okay, it worked until now. Okay, it worked until it worked until now. Because sometimes it's not always just about being right. Sometimes it's about being love. You know the reason why I'm sharing this is because I was raised in church, and I'm not saying perfect or anything like that. I see, on the contrary, I see all the brokenness and all the hurt, and I'm even part of failures and bad decisions and all the type of nonsense that we go through in life. But I've seen how people stand on a pulpit and they are right, but because they don't have love, they miss the opportunity for God to do something in someone's life. And for a long season, and I'm not saying we will be held accountable. I'm not taking away those things. I'm just sharing this. Is that I'm concerned that we come to a position in our life where we are technically right to one another. But because I don't have an ear to listen to your story, I lack empathy and I lack love for the condition that you are sitting in. Because you have a story and a reason and hurt and a background, and because of this background you respond in a certain way, not because you want to, just because that's the only way you've learned to survive. And now I hold someone accountable because I want to be right in. Man, can I, if I can refer to Jesus, and this is why the Pharisees struggled with Jesus, is because they knew he was supposed to say the right thing, but then he goes to sinners and he says the love thing to them. And it offends them, because how can this be acceptable? And Jesus just comes to a place where he says, because you don't know the story. It's not where Jesus comes ever to a point where he accepts the sin. But he comes to a place where he understands the story and he gives grace to fix the sin moving forward. And so this is where the challenge comes in. And this is where the story of the universe comes in. What is the point of the significance of us if we can't love? We can be significant, but there's no meaning, there's no purpose, there's nothing if we can't show some love to one another. Then this is just another planet. This is just another thing in the universe. It might be significant, it might have a little bit of specialness to that. But ladies and gentlemen, and broers and sisters, Kerkraad, whatever title you prefer this morning, I want you just to understand something, that it's more than being right. It's more than being significant. Come on, we have this specialness, but it means nothing if I can't love my brother and my sister. Even when I'm right. And so it brings us to this place where love is the key. But what is the point? You zoom out, you think about space, you think about this universe, you think about the vastness of this world. You know what? And this is okay, it's touching on philosophy a little bit, okay? But there's some thought that I feel is a little bit valuable to us this morning. The biggest concern when it comes to total annihilation of the specialness of earth, the biggest number one point concern is self-destruction. Self-destruction. It's not organic food. Okay, asteroids is quite high up because, the planet's got a history with asteroids and stuff. Okay, don't get me wrong. But a lot of scientists is not so concerned about those things because they can invent and produce technology that can do things about that. But there's one thing that they can't control, and that's the leaders of the world. And if we decide for hate to reign, we will destroy the little bit significance that we have. And the moment we lose that significance, we lose our meaning. Immediately, we lose our meaning. But when you take this beautiful planet that God has gifted us, and you add the character and the heart of God and say, listen here, we mess things up, we aren't perfect in life, we have emotions, we have trauma, we have all those things. But if we are not careful and we're not able to push through to a place where we love one another, then this is all meaningless. All of this is meaningless. This gathering is meaningless without love. Our families is meaningless without love. The technology we advance our life, it means nothing if there's no empathy. So I want you to understand something about Joseph. Is that Joseph's tears reveal that though Egypt gave him power, it did not steal who he was on the inside. And that's something expensive to say. This is not cheap, ladies and gentlemen. When you have the power and the authority to do what you want to do, and you deliberately choose love, that is some of the most difficult things to do in life. It's the most expensive thing to do in life. But listen carefully to what I'm saying. It's the only thing that gives purpose and meaning to this life. Yes, the universe is vast. And yes, our existence is rare. But significance without love becomes hollow. And so from this perspective, we sometimes confuse achievement with wholeness. If I can just get a better job, my mom will love me more. If I can just get a better income, my family will love me more. And this is in church as well. If I can just pray a little bit more, God will love me more. If I can just ask for forgiveness more, God will love me more. And we fall in the struggle of never feeling enough. And there's nothing wrong with pursuing excellence, pursuing a future, and pursuing a goal and a dream. There's nothing wrong with wanting to build something fantastic in this life. But if love is not part of the conversation, you're going to come to the end of the journey and realize it's not been worth it. Well, I'm not going to run myself out. Let me wait that for a second. I want you to read that sentence for yourself. But I want to put a disclaimer to this conversation. Do not let pain allow you to become cold. The reason why I'm sharing this with you is because pain has got a way of making us cold. Because it's the way we protect ourselves. But we must be very careful. Because there's a line in the sand where it shifts over from being hurt to becoming sinful. I'm not saying it's wrong to feel hurt. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm not saying it's wrong that you get help going through trauma and experience. On the contrary, I think that's fantastic to do. But we must be careful that we don't allow the devil to use our pain, to use it something against the love that God wants to have in our hearts. And it's not easy. I'm going to say this bluntly now. This is not easy. This is not cheap. This is not simple. I'm not sharing this news with you as a form of judgment to say you need to do better. Not at all. because it hurt, it's real. But I want to invite you, listen carefully, I want to invite you to consider, to give God an opportunity to restore something that's difficult to restore in your life. That's all I'm asking you. I'm not judging. I'm not pointing finger. Not at all. I'm asking you, are you willing to give God an opportunity to move in your heart? And it's not going to be easy. And it's not going to be cheap. And it's not going to be fixed overnight. I can guarantee that for you. But it's a careful place. Because if we say we want to pursue a relationship with God, we need to be careful that pain is not used as a weapon against ourselves. But if we can allow God to move, it can have transformation power in who we are. Again, I'm saying this is, it's said easy, but the price of the sentence is expensive. The sign of maturity and strength is when pain is not able to kill our capacity to love. When pain does not kill our capacity to love. I am confronted with this on a daily basis. And I've shared this with you before, because what happens with us in our lives is, after we go through certain things and certain patterns arise, our logical brain tells us that if we can do this consistently, it will happen over and over again. So there's a lot of logic with that. Okay, so it's how we think, it's how we protect ourselves. And so sometimes, can I use an example? Let's say you're generous over and over to someone, and you get frustrated because they misuse your generosity repeatedly. The problem is, after a while, we get, okay, let me talk about myself. I get borderline, I want to use a very harsh word. I'm not bitter, but I'm going to exaggerate the conversation, okay? Just to illustrate this. I get a little bit bitter in my inside of my heart, so that when someone else needs me to be generous in our lives, I already have an excuse why I'm not going to be generous because of what happens before. And here's what's happened. Because we are nice people, you and I, we have that feeling, but we're still generous in any case, okay? Because, stuff happens. And then guess what? The pain happens again. And then we give it a few months. We just keep it quiet. We don't show our emotions. We just keep it quiet in the back of our hearts. And then 6 months later, we say, okay, I'm going to give this a go one more time. And then the pain happens again. You know what happens? It makes it difficult to do ministry because ministry hurts. It's difficult to give love because the love hurts. It's difficult to give mercy because it hurts. It costs you something. And now it happens so many times, it becomes difficult. So why I'm sharing this with you, it's not throwing judgment on you. I experience these things in my life as well. But if I want to become a strong leader, can I use a better word? Sorry, I'm laughing because I don't want to preach this, but I have to. You see, if I want to be an obedient leader, if I want to be an obedient leader in God's kingdom, I need to come to terms with this idea that sometimes God will require me to be generous and I won't get any return for the generosity. Sometimes God is going to request me to give love to someone where I can't get the love back from them. If I want to be an obedient leader, if I want to be a strong leader. That doesn't mean we have to. I'm not saying you must. I'm just saying if my goals are to really come to a place where God can use me, will I be able to be the obedient leader? Even when I've got emotions and hurt and issues here and challenges here. And this is where the conversation becomes even more challenging. Because Joseph teaches us to use power to restore instead of taking revenge. He had the opportunity, but he chose to carry one more burden and reveal his emotions and say, in this world that we live in. He's got all the opportunities, but he deliberately chooses love. He deliberately chooses to restore. See, in my opinion, this becomes the ultimate test of power. If you are able to grow beyond yourself and use the gifting God has planted in your heart, not to take revenge, but to try and give love. Come on, man. This is the most challenging conversation, right? Most expensive conversation. Maybe even most hurtful conversation. Because you know it's not easy. It's not even comfortable. It's not cheap. But love is the only thing that gives meaning to what we have. Can I put it to you in other terms as we're going to conclude? Power without love is control. Intellect without love is arrogance. Money without love is selfish. And influence without love is manipulation. Can I share this with you? Success without love just leads to loneliness. It just leads to loneliness. But when we add love to the equation, power becomes protection. You see, wisdom becomes service. Money becomes generosity. And influence becomes healing. You can just stay on this slide for me. I'm sharing this message with you not because I think it's an easy conversation, but I'm sharing this with you as an invitation with this hope that we get enough courage, enough strength, and enough obedience in our life so that God can use us to be the love that this world so desperately needs. But it's not easy. Because for a long time we've been in this illusion that when you walk into this place, you get something magical and it makes your life better. In my experience, when we walk with God, we walk into this place and God gives us a problem to solve. And He asks us, are we willing to take up our cross and follow Him? No perks. No special gold dust falling down from heaven, but a responsibility to take up. And what God does in our lives, He modeled this to us first. He's not expecting us to do something which He did not do Himself. And He says, I want you to look at what I did with my son. How I gave him to you, not when you were perfect. How I sent him to you, not when things were in order. On the contrary, I sent him to you because things weren't in order in your life. I sent him to you because you weren't perfect. I sent him to you because your clothes were dirty. I sent him to you for one simple reason, to build you a bridge which you cannot build. And He says, now, church, this is who we are today. I need you to model that example. And now I need you to show that love and show that mercy to people who do not deserve this always. And then when we fight back about, but why? And then He comes back and He says, because I did that for you. And now I want you to model the character of Christ. Now I want you to model the sacrifice of Jesus. I want you to model what I did for you. Why? Because the moment we lose our love in this world, there's no future left for our kids. There's no future left for humanity. There's no future left. But God knows what He's doing. And if He can keep love warm in all the churches around, and He can remind us about the sacrifice, and He can inspire us to allow our hearts to make those difficult calls and to try and show love, there's hope for the world. Why? Because we are fantastic? No. Because we allow God to move through us. Can you allow God to use love in your heart to change the world? Can I make it simple? Can I make it simple? And expensive? Some of you might get angry for what I'm asking now. Can you allow God to use love just to be there for your family? Don't even think far. Just there, just there. Will you allow God to use love? And this is where we all get confronted and challenged. We're going to move over to the communion table soon. But before we do that, I want to just ask you. I'm not telling you what to do, but I'm asking you, would you use this communion moment and reflect about this conversation before God? Speak to Him before this. And if you walk out here this door and you decide you're not going to change anything, you are welcome to come back. No judgment. I'm not going to point finger at anyone. But I'm hoping that you would be wise enough to trust God with the next steps, even when it's expensive. Because I know that when God leads us and He shapes us and He guides us, it's meant for our good.